Good morning. Thank you for joining our third monthly webinar Wednesday series. Today's focus will be on reinventing reporting, how ServiceNow's analytics replatforming is changing the game. Some brief housekeeping that today's session is being recorded and it will be available on demand afterwards, and you can share it with anyone that you feel may also enjoy it. We will be hosting a live Q&A at the end of the speaking slot, and you may submit questions live during this session. There's a Q&A box right at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to submit them in advance and we'll do our best to answer these. Should you have any Zoom technical issues, feel free to message me directly. And finally, without further ado, I'll hand it over to our speaker today, and that's Mike Turner.
Great. Thank you very much, Samara, and good morning, everyone. Let me just share my screen and we'll kick off. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. So good morning again. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mike Turner. I'm a principal consultant here at Unifii. We are an elite ServiceNow partner within the UK and Ireland. I've been working with reporting for the past 20 years or so at various different companies, Capgemini, Computer Center, VMware, and from a range of different platforms, whether it was ITSM, for example, or even financial management solutions. And for the past 3 years or so, actually almost 3 years in July, I've been working at Unifii trying to build up the analytics practice. Essentially trying to help our customers to get the most out of what they can in ServiceNow, and especially the inbuilt analytics tools and reporting capability that comes with the platform. My team also works quite closely with the product management team at ServiceNow. So we're regularly reviewing directly with the product team new features that are coming out. I'm also talking actively about your feedback. So as we're having these discussions, as we're looking at new features and functionality, as we're hearing things that maybe aren't quite working as well as they could, we're also taking that into some of our conversations. So those things certainly help us as we're going through. So today's webinar is all around the replatforming of ServiceNow analytics. For those of you that were on the previous session that I ran, you would have seen a very quick demo as to what we're talking about here. One of the things that came out of that session in the poll was a pretty unanimous set of answers, which were pointing in the direction of they want, you guys want to have a deeper session and demo of some of those new features that are coming up. So this session has basically been put in to try and achieve that, to give you more of an overview as to what it means to you guys and what it means to your organization. So we'll do a little bit of a repeat of some of the things that we went through on the last session. Try not to spend too much time on the slides. I want to spend more time on an active demo, which will take up the majority of this. But we'll go through a little bit around what is the new target operating model and why is it being put forward. We'll do that deep dive of the new features. I'm going to be demoing on Utah. So you'll also see some additional features that we didn't discuss, we weren't able to discuss in the previous session. So we'll be able to bridge a few gaps on that as well. We'll also talk about some additional features that you might find on the ServiceNow store. So not everything is in general release in Utah. There are some additional features that are also available to you to install through components and upgrade. I'll give you a bit of some hints and tips as to how you can go and achieve that. We'll do a final wrap up and then we'll finish off with a Q&A. Depending on how we get on with time, it'll be 10 to 15 minutes. So before we jump into the detail, especially for those of you that joined our previous session, just a quick poll, and just start that on the screen now. So maybe 1 second, and I'll just get that launched. Okay, so I hope that's shown on the screen now. I'm just really interested to understand if, for any of you that are on the call, how many of you have actually reviewed platform analytics in your own instance? Have you played around with this? So I'll leave that on the screen for a couple of seconds. Okay, I'm just going to end the poll there. I'll just play the results. So interestingly, so we've got 25% of you, about a quarter of you have played with it. The rest have not had the opportunity yet. So great insights to have in terms of your experience and whether you've seen any of this. Yeah, so just stop sharing that. And we'll talk a bit more around what's changed and the why, as to what's happened, and what the feedback is that led to some of these replatforming of the solution. So what we can see on the diagram is essentially a view of how reporting has traditionally looked like. It's certainly probably how you're using reports today. When we look at reports, we essentially can create those either through a central team or self-service, and the user can create those directly on individual data tables. But we also have the concept of performance analytics and to configure anything on performance analytics and dashboards. We've got to go and actually use different functionality. We've got to use these things called PA widgets, and they sit on top of your indicators. And we can either put a report into a dashboard, we can put a widget into a dashboard. But if we want filters, we've got to go back down into almost an admin layer of predefining what those filters are that people can use. Same with breakdowns and jobs, for example. So really, there's some limitations in terms of what can be achieved by an end user from a responsive dashboard standpoint. We can drill down to Analytics Hub as well if you are using performance analytics. But in terms of the feedback that we gathered over the years, especially what we've heard from ServiceNow, in terms of how they're positioning this, it's often felt like a disjointed experience. When we are looking at performance analytics and reporting, they are two very different pieces of functionality, and to configure them and get the most out of each, you've got to go through completely different UIs to achieve that. So there's not a single look and feel, especially in the presentation there as well, for those. There are some limited capabilities, so think about the charts and the options that you might have for styling, the data sources that you can select and choose from, the way the dashboards actually behave, the filters that you can put on dashboards. There's various limitations in all of those different areas. And overall, some of the feedback is that it can be difficult for the average user to use. They might be able to use reports, but when they move to the dashboards, especially if they want to get the most out of filtering, that can become difficult. It's something that often we see gets pushed across to a central reporting team or an admin team to go and do, or the user simply give up around that. We've also heard that permissions are confusing. So as we're going through and sharing reports and sharing dashboards, there are often double permissions that need to be put in place. So you've got to put permissions on your reports, and you've also got to put permissions on your dashboard as well to make sure people can see things. And that can be a little bit counterintuitive at times. There are inconsistencies today in configuration and consumption options. So essentially, if you're looking at how do we build a certain visualization, you might find that the options that you have available to configure that, you might want on a different mix, but something that you might have maybe on a pivot table, you want to have the same thing on a bar report, but some of these options aren't always there. So there's been a recognition that there are inconsistencies in terms of the options that are available across the platform at the moment. Reporting has traditionally been placed into an old UI. It certainly feels a little bit out of date now. The experience, we want that to be more modern and have a greater look and feel for that. And importantly, we want to make sure that the capability can actually deal with the volume demands that we currently face within most customers, as well as the performance, and make sure it performs well. So what's changing? Essentially, we're now looking towards the new platform analytics model. Not to confuse platform analytics with performance analytics. It's not an interchangeable term. Platform analytics is essentially now the new phrase or the new term for analytics as a whole, encompassing both reporting and performance analytics. The key parts to recognise with this are that we've no longer got reports. So this functionality all sits within Next Experience and within Platform Analytics Workspace. And this is what we'll take you through on today's session. And within here, we can see that we've got in the presentation layer now things called data visualization. Data visualizations are now ultimately the replacement for what we knew before as reports or performance analytics widgets. It's a single mechanism that allows us to define a visualization in a consistent way. Then we can place that on either a individual data table, so maybe your instant table or your project data, for example, or we can also put it onto your KPIs, your individual performance analytics indicators, if you are utilizing some of the features that come with performance analytics. If you're not using performance analytics today, don't need to worry about that. We can still get the most out of the data visualization functionality directly with the data tables themselves. But it also opens up other opportunities. For things like user experience analytics, there are additional plugins that now allow you to go and plug directly into some of the UX analytics data to get some visualization out of that. We can also see that these data visualizations no longer sit into the responsive dashboards that we've become accustomed to. They set these things called workspace dashboards, and they're brand new. We don't have filters that need to be created down here. We've got the ability to actually define filters in the presentation layer by end user. And Analytics Hub has now been replaced with KPI details, and we've got some additional functionality that sits alongside that called KPI signals. So overall, the consistency has been tried to be improved by ServiceNow. We've got a single visual component that allows you to create visualizations no matter what your data is in, and to have a very similar look and feel of that visualization, whether it's something that you're sitting onto data or something that you're sitting directly onto performance analytics and the KPI there. The dashboards themselves have been much improved. We'll see that in the demo as we go into that. We'll certainly see how the enhancements of the filtering functionality get rid of some of the limitations that we've all been accustomed to in the classic UI previously. And everything's in one place. It's really important. Everything that we're seeing is, it's not a case of we've got to go to Analytics Hub, which is in a completely different area of the platform, and we've got to go to reports and the menu, and then we've got to go to dashboards. With the platform analytics workspace, it's all in one place, or tries to be in one place. So we can go and look at different tabs and get to the insights in an exploratory way. We can go and get that information without having to jump across into multiple different screens. So that said, I don't want to go too much into the slides. So that said, I'm going to go and we'll run the remainder of the session as a demo. So give me a second, I'll just get my screen loaded. Okay. So hopefully you're now seeing ServiceNow on the screen. As you now go through, and as I said, this is a Utah instance, you should have the ability to see this option at the top called Workspaces. If you haven't yet enabled the next experience UI, you can still get to the platform analytics workspace. You can simply put the what's up here in the URL into your own instance, and you can still get to the same piece of functionality. But if you are using the next experience UI itself, you can choose from the workspace option, and you can launch the platform analytics workspace from here. As we can see, this is now launched us Analytics Center, which is essentially sitting inside the workspace itself. And this is essentially a one-stop shop. We've now got the ability to see all of our dashboards, our data visualizations, and our KPIs all in one place. KPIs come from performance analytics. The data visualizations are essentially our report and PA widget replacements. And our dashboards are now the replacement for the responsive dashboards that we've known previously. So let's start our journey by looking and exploring a little bit more as to what data visualizations are. So from the data visualization screen, we can see a list of any data visualizations that are currently available to you. We can see, and those could be things that you've created as a user, or it could be something that has been shared with you equally. And we can see some options on the left-hand side, and we'll talk a bit more about those as we go through. But for now, let's just start by creating a brand new visualization. So this is Visualization Designer. This is available to anyone that has access into the workspace, and they can go and create their own visualization in a self-service based approach. So any users should be able to go and do this. And from here, let's start off by looking at the right-hand side, and we can see the different visualization options that are available to us. So you might be familiar already with many of these. They're things that you might see within reports today, things like your scores, your dials, your individual areas and pivot tables, etc. And let's start off by selecting a single score.
Mike, I'm so sorry to interrupt your session.
Sure.
I just wanted to ask, is it possible for you to just possibly check your audio settings settings. It's just that we've had a few attendees so that the audio sounds a bit patchy.
No, no.
Might be breaking off.
Let me try. Yeah, I'm definitely
Apologies.
selecting on my headset. Let me just try. I'm just going to try muting and then unmute and see if that comes back at all. Okay, has that come back at all? Is that any better?
So for me, it's actually been fine. Okay, audio seems to be a little bit better then.
Apologies. So shall I continue?
Yes, if that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, no problem.
Apologies for interrupting.
No worries at all. So what we can see now is the visualization configuration. I've now selected a single score as my configuration. And from here, we've got the option to select our chart title. We can type that in here. We'll see that we've got a lot more options than you might have had traditionally with the reports that are available to you. From a data source perspective, we can now see that we've got the ability to define where our data comes from. And if we click on Add Data Source, we fundamentally see two options. We see the ability to select data from an individual table. And really the way to think about this is from the perspective of reporting. If you're creating reports today, you'll most likely be putting your report directly onto a table that's in the platform. So whether that's the instant table or the project table, you would go and locate that table. And if you were to create a performance analytics widget, you would be utilizing indicators. These are the indicators and KPIs that come with performance analytics or things that you might have created yourself. But the important thing here to show is that we can choose with a single element, with a single configuration option, to go and pick from either of those, whether it's a table or an indicator. So in this case, I'm going to look for the instant table. So I'm searching for incident and I'm looking under the tables and I can now pick that. I can select that as it is, or I can go and add some custom options. So my custom conditions here, I might want to say I want only the incidents that were created on the current month. So I'm essentially selecting that in the same way that you might create a report today, pick your table and you add your conditions. So maybe I want this to be a monthly report. Maybe I want it to be over the last 3 months. We can go and apply that condition and add the source into the data. Essentially what we've now got is a view of this is the number of incidents that were created on the current month. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it new incidents. I'm going to create a couple of versions of this. So I'm just going to call this non-KPI now. We see that option, the title, is now displayed on the top line of the widget itself. We do have additional settings. Some of these additional settings are mainly available for performance analytics, so things like your targets and changes. These would really light up where you're using a KPI. We'll see a counterexample of this type of configuration in a second. We can see that we've got the option of whether we want this to follow filters. So if we were going to place it on a dashboard later on, do we want it to follow filters? Do we want it to show filter icon? Do we want to allow a drill down? We can even enable a real-time update on this as well. I'm just going to tick that. So if we were looking at the current month and we were looking at this and people were logging the instance in the background, we would be able to see that number going up in real time. From a presentation layer perspective, we can change the size of the scores. And this is a new feature as part of Utah. We've also got the ability now to add an icon. And this essentially improves the ability to show this and visualize whatever you're looking at here. So whether it's a heartbeat, whether it's an exclamation mark, there is a range of different icons that might be available to you that you can search for and look through. So if you want a down arrow, an up arrow, etc., you can go and pick this. So this is a brand new feature that's just been introduced as part of Utah. We'll leave that there for now. We can choose to have a icon with or without a background, so personal preference, whichever one suits you best. And one really nice feature that is again new within Utah, at least for the score functionality. This is something that I think I talked a little bit around with pivot tables. So this was there at that time. but they've now extended that functionality now into scores as well. So for example, here, I can make this a single color, but what I can also do is change this and use the dynamic color option. So we can add rules dynamically. And perhaps I want to say, if this is greater than 500, I want the color to be red. Pick the dark red there. Again, I might want the icon color to be either the same or different. You can personalize that as you need to. And we'll now find that that condition is being applied. And that's a really useful thing. So if you've got a KPI, you've got a number that you know needs to be different depending on the criteria that's been met, you can now add these color rules in here. So imagine if we were creating a visualization on top of a percentage calculation, we can essentially put a rule in here that says, if it's over 90%, then we want it to be green. If it's under 90%, we want it to be red, etc. So this is a feature that's typically been a little bit problematic in traditional reporting sense. You'd have to go in and do some advanced coloring options within the tool to go and apply these. Whereas now you can actually go and use this as an end user and apply your coloring rules directly within the application itself. So we can add more rules if we wanted to here. So I'm now going to save this visualization and we'll call it new incidents, non-KPI. I just want to distinguish between what is what's something that sits on PA and something that doesn't. So I've now got that visualization. It's now saved. That visualization is now saved into my library. So from here, I can see all of my visualizations, and this is your library of those visualizations themselves. You can use these independently, like you would with normal reports, or you can then reuse those for a dashboard. So I'm going to go through now and add very quickly another version of that. But this time I'm going to choose the options of using a indicator. So I'm going through the same way I'm creating that, but I'm going to look for the number of new incidents. That's a indicator that I know exists for within performance analytics, and I can pick that from the indicator section. You'll see that we've got the option here, rather than filtering directly onto raw data, we do have the ability to go and filter for particular priority, any of the breakdowns that might be available on your indicator themselves, but we can add that in. So right now that's telling me that there's no score. And the reason why there's no score is because I've got no data for yesterday. So we can go look at the metric and I can change that. Maybe I want to use the options that are available as part of performance analytics to say, I want to use the by-month sum plus option here. By doing that, it's telling me I've got 576. There's not much context around that at the moment. So again, I'm going to give it a title. So new incidents. I'm going to put KPI, just so I know that this is coming out of performance analytics. What we can also do is add some of these other options. We can add things like showing the score date. This is coming from March. We can show the change from the previous period. So are we up or down from February? We can add labels, we can add change percentages, and so on. And we can add a spark line that you might be used to. So this is essentially now your replacement for your PA widgets. But we can create these visualizations in exactly the same way as we create a normal report. Again, if we can enable whether we want to follow filters or not. If the indicator itself supports real-time data, then we can tick the real-time box. One new feature that's coming to Utah is the ability to customize the no data available message. So here we can actually put a very specific predefined illustration on here, and we can customize the text. So if you're not happy with the kind of the standard, the message that comes up here, you've got full control now of customizing that itself, which is a big feature, I think, that will help give more explanation, especially if you don't expect there to be data for that particular metric. You might want to write some words to that effect. Maybe that is something that only becomes available on a certain day of the month, for example. Again, we can look at changing the score size. We can change the style of the spark line, whether that's a line or an area. And again, we can put an icon. So in the same way that we can visualize and present data from reports, from the equivalent of the reporting functionality, we can do the same for the equivalent of the PA side of things as well. So we've got a very similar look and feel, whether it's on report data or whether it's on the PA widget type data itself. And again, we've also got the ability, if we wanted to apply some dynamic color rules. Again, if we want to change the color of the icon or the text up here, we can go and do that. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to call it the new incidents KPI. So now what have I got? I've got two individual visualizations, one on the left-hand side, and we can see that we can tab through these. As I've created this, I've got the non-KPI visualization, and I've got the KPI equivalent on here, and I can see both of those on the screen. I can do a few more things with either of these. So the best thing that we can do is we can share that visualization. Maybe it's something that you created just for yourself, and that's absolutely fine. There's no need to go and create that. But if this is something that you've shared with an individual, either a user, group of users, or a particular role, here's where you would do that. And so, for example, here, I might want to pick Able Tutor, and I want to give Able the ability to view that particular visualization. So they can go in and have a look at it. And maybe I want to search for Beth Anglin, and I want to give Beth the ability to edit that. And we can see that as I've added these in, I can now see Beth showing as the ability to edit, Able showing as the ability to view. There's one extra feature that we can enable here, and that's the can share option. So quite often we've also had feedback to say that we want more control over who can share what. This granular set of permissions now tries to achieve that. So an individual user can either share, can either share and view, and share and edit, or they can just edit and view. So if they can edit, they can automatically view it. You don't need to tick both of these boxes. In fact, it doesn't allow you to do that. So you can edit, you can be a viewer, and you have to explicitly enable the extra option here to say can share. Essentially, once you've done that, you can confirm that, and you've now shared that particular visualization with your users. One extra nice function, that piece of functionality, especially for maybe central reporting teams, you've got the ability now to control things that are essentially official or certified visualizations and dashboards within the environment. So you might be sitting there within your organization thinking, I've got 10,000 reports in there. 10% of them are things that we've created centrally, but 90% of them are things that end users have created. But there's no real and easy way to distinguish that today. The idea being here is that I can mark that as being certified. You do need a certain role to be able to achieve this. So it wouldn't be something that's available to every normal user. Essentially, your power users, your central reporting teams would be able to go and mark their own work as being certified. That now becomes something that a user can trust. If someone within the organization comes across that or filters for anything that's certified, they know that this is an official metric. This is something they can use and without questioning, how has it been created? Does it conform to standards and data dictionaries and all those good things? So that was in a nutshell an overview as to how would we create a visualization in isolation. And like I said, we can go and create different visualization of different types. And as you create those visualizations, they will end up showing up in your data visualization section here. And we can go and filter for those that are certified. We can see that the non-KPI version that we created, I certified that. I didn't certify the KPI one. That has no meaning other than the fact of being able to flag it and being able to have extra trust around that particular item. So let's move on and take a quick look at dashboard functionality. So within dashboards, we can create a brand new dashboard. And if you've got extra permissions, if you're an admin or if you are a UI admin, you would be presented with two options here. Most users would only get one. You typically only see the inline editor option. We're only going to focus on this session on that inline editor. Technical editor will essentially take you to UI Builder. This is something that is available. It can be used for people that are that have a really deep skill set, have a very specific requirement to really tailor a dashboard using some of the UI capabilities. But this is a very advanced option. Certainly not recommended for majority of users. The inline editor is almost your equivalent of what you use today when you look at responsive dashboards. We're going to continue along this path with the inline editor itself, and we're going to give it a name of demo. As I create the dashboard, we'll see that we've got a canvas, and the canvas has got lots of different dots on it. From here, I could do a few things. So I can add my new elements. When I'm adding an element, I can add something out of the library. And the library is essentially what we've just looked at. So we can pre-create different visualizations and we can make them available to dashboard. And we can click on dashboard now, and we can go and let's add in the non-KPI version into here. We can now see that that's instantly been added to this canvas. I can add a tab. So let's relabel the first one, tab 1. My tab 1 has got my KPI, my non-KPI visualization. And I'm going to create another tab, give it a name, and I'm going to add in my second visualization that I create. I'll call it the KPI version here. One additional feature that's been introduced in Utah is a much closer snap to grid feature. So if you have played around with this in Tokyo, for example, you might find that when you were trying to resize your widgets, that they were maybe snapping to every 3 or 4. So there has been an improvement in Utah where we can actually snap that directly to the lines to get much better customization and control of those widgets themselves. What we can see now is we've got an area at the top and we've got 2 tabs. On tab 1, I've got my non-KPI visualization. On tab 2, we've got the KPI visualization there. Both showing the same number, but remember, one's showing data from the individual data source and the other showing data coming out of performance analytics. Let's talk a little bit around some of the new features in terms of filtering. So I'm again clicking add new element and add in a filter option. Traditionally, you would have needed to create interactive filters. They would need to be created by an admin and then being able to be added on for you. These are now things that you as a user or your user base can actually go and use and create themselves. So in this case, I'm going to create a single select filter. I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to use the priority as a label. And I'm going to add my source. So I'm essentially saying that, what do I want my filter to be on? I'm going to pick the instant table and I'm going to filter for the priority field. I've now added that. You will see that there's an option, and we'll talk about the second option in a second, to either use table or indicator breakdowns, but I'm only using the table option here. And I'm selecting the instant table and the priority field. Hopefully that should allow me to do that. So let me just try that again. Okay, there we go. You will notice as well that anything that we're doing within these dashboards, we're in an editing mode. So we can explicitly enter into editing mode or out of it. So we have to save our changes as we're going through. And once we've done that, we can exit the editing mode and we can start utilizing the functionality. So in this case, I want to select P1s. And we'll see that my priority filter has now had an effect on this visualization here. We can see that's applied by hovering over it. We can see that it's applied the priority filter. Now we selected this on the table, but what we can also see is that the priority filter has also been applied to my PA KPI here. We can see that it's actually filtered onto the priority as well. I've done that because it knows dynamically that the breakdown that is on performance analytics is linked to the same data set. So it's dynamically hooked those things up and allowed you to apply that filter. Let's add a second filter. So let's try and add let's do a multiple select this time. We'll call this one groups and we will map this. Instead of choosing the table, I'm going to use the indicator breakdown. So if you're not using performance analytics, don't worry too much about this part. But if you are, and you're using a combination of PA and reports today, then you might be interested in this feature. So this essentially allows us to go and map to the assignment group breakdown. And all this actually does is it auto maps all the different tables that this assignment group breakdown uses. So rather than having to go and individually add in the mapping for instant assignment group and change assignment group, so if this was a multi-process table, it's gone and done that dynamically for us So it's taken a lot of that legwork away. And I said, I know that this breakdown maps to all these tables, so I'm going to give you all those mappings out of the box in one go. So let's see what happens when we apply that. Although I've applied that on the assignment group as a breakdown, and this tab 1 is still only a report. What happens if I now apply this? So let's try and select the technical services support team. We can select multiple options if we had them as well here. But we'll see now that that has now applied our filter to this, which is our non-KPI. We've now got the priority and the group applied. So really important. So although we've selected it to be mapped based on a breakdown, because the mapping itself has generated that that mapping to the incident table, it now has applied that to the instance as well. And we can see it's also applied to the KPI. A really important point here, maybe one that's been overlooked, is that within traditional dashboards, we don't have the capability today to apply interactive filters into the header. So whilst we've always had the capability to add a breakdown at the top and individual interactive filters on each tab, the flexibility that this new functionality allows, it gives us the ability to add more than one. So we can have multiple filters that all sit in the header. And that's really important, especially for those of you that aren't using performance analytics today, to get some of the benefits of the filtering capabilities across multiple tabs without having to repeat the same filters multiple times. The other benefit that we've got here is that even in performance analytics on a dashboard, we were always limited to only applying one filter at a time. There is still a limitation of 2, unfortunately, but we can now actually utilize both of these filters at the same time to give us that kind of information there. Let's add another tab very quickly, and I am going to just show you some of the new functionality in terms of the pivot table functionality. So I'm going to add a new data visualization. Now, just a note there, when we started this, we actually pre-created a couple of visualizations. We created a visualization for the KPI and non-KPI version. We've added those to the tabs. What I've just done directly there was I've not used the library option. I've used the data visualization option directly. This means that users can go and create the dashboards and create the visualizations at the same time without having to go off screen and create reports first. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change my visualization type to a pivot table. And that shows something really cool that we could never achieve with the classic UI functionality. So in this example, I want to add a data source. Let's start with incident. And we're going to add a custom condition. So I want this to be things that are created on, again, I'm going to say on this month. I'm going to add that as a data source. We'll see it's automatically created a metric for us. It's given us a count of incidents. I'm going to rename that because I know that that's actually, I want to represent that as new incidents. And what I can now do is add another data source. I'm still going to use the same table. I'm still going to use the incident table, but I want to add a different condition. This time I want to add the condition of the state not being cancelled. And I also want to add a condition of the resolved field being empty, which I want to know what's currently open. Okay. Let me just save that. Sometimes it does have a little bit of a niggle where the metrics don't refresh. So I'm just going to refresh the screen quickly and hopefully that will come back. Great, there we go. So I'm going to rename that one as well. So I'm going to rename this one to open instance. But I don't just have to use the instance table. So maybe I also want to add something for change. I want to add changes that were created. The great thing about this now is that whereas report functionality that we had before would only allow you to have one metric on one particular table, and actually you were always forced to go and also add in some additional grouping, we don't necessarily have that same constraint today here. I got the same issue again, so I'm just going to refresh here because I do want to show you the rest of the functionality there. But the idea being here that we can add multiple different data sources, and we can add different metrics that relate to each of those different data sources as we go through. And what we can also do is add group by. Let's imagine that I've just renamed that count of change requests to new changes as well. I'm going to now go through and add some group bys. Always away when you're demoing. Let me try it again here. Okay, there we go. So I've now got 3 columns. I've got my new instance, my open instance, and my count of my change requests. I'm going to add some rows on here. So very quickly, I'm going to add one for my assignment groups. And we'll see that it's auto mapping across the 3 different data sources that I had. I'm going to add another one for my service. And again, we should see that that's mapped to all of my tables. And I'm going to add a third one. I think we can go 5 levels down, but I'll stop here. So I can go down to my service offering. So the concept behind this is that we can now add in multiple different metrics across different levels of breakdown here. So I'm also going to show a few other things, and we'll save it and we'll actually play around with it a little bit. So we've got control over the sorting features. We've got the ability, again, to show whether it's following filters or not. We can also go through and freeze rows. So as we scroll down, we should be able to see the ability to freeze the header row. We can also freeze the footer row if we so chose there. We can also show to have the pivot unexpanded by default. So only when you open it up and want to expand it can you go and do that. So that might save a bit of screen real estate there. We can truncate columns, etc. So I'm going to save that there, and we'll have a look at how it looks like without being in the editing mode. So you'll see that it's also automatic starts following the filters. I'm just going to take those off and we'll see what we get. So this is an example of what we can now see. We've got on the left-hand side, we've got a collapsed view of a pivot, and we've got 3 columns: our new instant volume, our open instant volume, and our count of change requests. So basically our new change volume as well. We could also add in KPIs, so we can mix and match between what we're using from a PA perspective with what we're using from a reporting perspective as well. And we can go through and collapse these. We can play around, we can expand and scroll through. So if I want to go down to all different levels, we can go and do that. We can also sort on the field as well. So if we want to sort by open instance or change requests, then we can also go and achieve that information. For anything that we're looking at, we can also drill down. So if we're drilling down into from a visualization that doesn't sit on a KPI, it will take you down to the data just like it always did. And if we're drilling down from something that is KPI based, then it will take you now down to KPI details. KPI details is just a direct replacement for Analytics Hub. We won't talk too much around this on this session today, but essentially KPI details gives you that view that we had in Analytics Center, where we can drill down and start doing some advanced trending and information relating to that. With our dashboards, we can also share those. So as we go through, we've got the ability to share those as we could previously. Again, the same consistent way that we do for our reports. One nice thing just to mention around dashboards is that we can create visualizations. We can put them directly into the dashboards. We don't need to share the visualizations first if we're building them as part of the dashboard editor experience. But we can go and share individual dashboards as we need to. And we've also got that added extra option to go and certify dashboards on the screen from here. If you are a certain user, I think we've got to be in edit mode to go and do that. So I can mark that as certified, and it will show the certified flag up there as well. A couple of really quick features just to make you aware of their existence. So within Utah, they have added new features that allow you to export. So If you were to want to export into PDF or JPEG, you can go and use these options and export some individual visualizations. There has been a slight enhancement around the dashboards. They have introduced the ability to create a printer-friendly mode. Essentially, it opens the UI in a different page view, and you can print that screen out if you wanted to do that. And just finally, we've got a new feature as well that isn't actually part of the general release of Utah, but worth mentioning because it is something that you can get available to you, and that's a schedule feature. So this is something that we'll probably see officially launched in the next release, but essentially we can go through and start scheduling individual visualizations in a similar way that you might do that today by email to individual users. So that functionality is also starting to be available as well. Before we sort of start wrapping up, I do want to also just show you where you can find some of these extra features. So you might find that some of these capabilities that we've seen today are not in your instance. If you've got Utah today, some things might not look and feel exactly the same. A tip, if you do have access, if you're an administrator within your organization and you've got the ability to manage your platform, you can go to the ServiceNow store and you can look for the ServiceNow products section. And from here, if you scroll down, you should be able to find the section called Platform Analytics Experience. So by opting into Platform Analytics Experience itself, and if you clicked on the opt-in option, if you presumably you've got that ability, you will start getting a capability that is beyond some of the features that might be there out of the box in Utah. So that could include bug fixes. It could include new functionality like the scheduled export that we just had a very brief glimpse at just now. And if we are also, if you are to go and do that, just a tip that we can also go and add. You also need to go through and upgrade your components. So again, this is something that's slightly more technical. Your system administrators might need to do this, but if you have opted into that functionality, if you are going into your system applications and you search for the term SN app par, you will get the individual components that come with the store release, and from there you'll be able to upgrade. So this is an example here. So out of the box, it might be currently installed as 2.0.3, but because I've subscribed to the ServiceNow store, there is another option feature available to us under 2.1.4, and I could go and upgrade this. So just a note there, so you might find if you are wanting to experiment on this in a bit more detail, you can go to the store, you can go and opt into that functionality. Just make sure that you also upgrade your components to match that functionality, otherwise you might not see that within your environment itself. So that brings us to the end of today's demo. I'm just going to switch to back to the presentation for a second, and we'll just do some closing remarks before we go into Q&A. So final thoughts really are start thinking about your adoption journey to platform analytics. So this functionality exists and coexists alongside reporting today and the dashboard that you're all used to. But it is also there. So in Tokyo, that functionality is there. In Utah, it's been expanded upon. Out of the box, your users would have the ability to go into this. So have a think about how you're adopting that. Is it something you're hiding? Is it something you're embracing? I'd certainly recommend to start playing with the features and start utilizing them. And think about what your journey is to go and migrate. Just like home pages were deprecated and it took years to get people over from home pages to the responsive dashboards, we're now starting a journey from the responsive dashboards into the platform analytics space and the reports. Definitely, recommend you guys thinking about how do you standardize? If you've got central reporting teams, how do you start looking at utilizing the certified features that are available to you? Certainly review incremental features. There might be in between Utah and the next release, you might find extra features and bug fixes go into the platform release on the store. And again, like I said, you can go and opt in to that and upgrade your different components. And just finally there, we are currently looking at releasing a reporting maturity assessment offering to our customers. It's currently in the pipeline. We're working on exactly what that looks like. certainly be interested in knowing people's thoughts as to is that something that you guys want or would like us to discuss with you in more detail. Any of these features, anything that we've seen today, feel free to reach out to us after the call and we can have some more discussions on. And just finally, in terms of a poll before we go into the Q&A, just one question, just in terms of the potential to have a reported maturity assessment within your organization. We're really interested to understand if that would be of any interest to any of the people that are currently on the call. As I said, it's something that we're working on, but excited to, when we're ready to talk about it, excited to bring that to you either directly or maybe as part of one of the next sessions that we have. So let me pause that there. The great 11 people that voted there have all opted in. So thank you very much for that. And I think we are just about on time and we've got 10 minutes left. So we'll finish off the last 10 minutes with any Q&A.
Yeah, so thanks, Mike. Great session. We've got a few questions coming through the Q&A box, so we'll work our way through them. We have a question on how does the sharing option link to roles? For example, report_group. Is this still required for users to be able to share reports?
So by default, anyone that has access to the platform analytics section will be able to go and share anything they create themselves out of the box. And as we've seen before, that when we do apply that sharing option, you've got the ability as a creator of the visualization to define who, if you want those people that you've shared it to be able to onward share that functionality. There's definitely some different roles and features of platform analytics that don't quite align with what you're used to today from a reporting standpoint. One of the other two things to call out there are the Viz admin and dashboard admin roles. Those two roles will give you a bit of extra functionality. The Viz admin, for example, that will control or power user functionality to be able to create anything and share everything. Dashboard admin do the similar thing around the certification piece there. But you will find overall that the sharing capability is really linked to the person that's created it and whether they want the onward person to be able to share it there as well. There's probably some things that we could do around the ACL if we wanted to restrict that further.
Great. We've also got a question. Putting self-serve capabilities aside for one moment, could you please comment on what the benefits of a central reporting team might be by migrating to PAW over current offerings?
So it's probably a very long answer to that question. Benefits of having a central reporting team, just overall, really control, right? So I think there's pros and cons of having central reporting teams versus having end user. And I don't think there's any right answer. I think it's to find a good balance between the two. End user, having that end user capability to go and create a self-service model is fantastic. It enables them to go and do that in quick time. Having a central reporting team there to create centrally focused reports and definitions and control a level of standards is also really is a really powerful thing, especially if your end users don't really understand the data. So especially if you're doing things like ITSM, you're looking at SLM and building on some of the SLAs, that can get quite tricky to go and create. But ultimately, it's down to whatever's right for your organization. Certainly happy to have a more in-depth conversation around that one.
Great, perfect. Thank you so much. There's another one. Can we use reports, report sources, and indicators as data sources here?
Yes. So indicators, we already covered off. So when we talked about the KPI, when we looked at the data sources there, we saw exactly that. So we chose from either having a table or we chose from having an individual indicator. So we can choose certainly those two things. From a report source perspective, one thing, and actually I'll quickly just share that again so that we can see. Give me a second. So essentially when we were creating our individual data sources, we had the ability, is it going to work? Give me a second, let me just try a new visualization option there. Okay. So we had the ability to pick from a table or an indicator there. If I was to pick from indicator, so the last question was, can we use report sources? Report sources are basically now called predefined conditions within here. The report sources functionality isn't replicated in the next experience that you get. But if you do have report sources, you can go and use them from here. I don't know, I'm sure they're looking at your ServiceNow, looking at replicating more of that functionality as per some other items as well that aren't quite yet here, and they are always incrementing through the releases. So yeah, we'll see more of that, I think, in the future.
Thank you. Is there any impact to existing reports and dashboards when you update Now experience, or are there new capabilities applied to them without impact to the core features of the old reports of the dashboard?
No, absolutely no impact. This is completely separate functionality. Your reports and dashboards will still stay there in exactly the same way as they are today. This is additional functionality that sits on completely different tables and completely different UI. So absolutely no impact at all. Where we've got to think about more is around how do we get people off of the old reports and dashboards and onto the new stuff. And we should start seeing the migration functionality coming in from ServiceNow that allows you to ultimately start migrating and converting those reports and dashboards into some of the new functionality and features that we've seen today. But that's still in development, and we've not got a definitive date on that.
Thank you. Do recipients of a shared report or dashboard also need to have permissions to the underlying data from which the report or dashboard was initially created?
Have to have data access? Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Don't necessarily have to have visualization access. So if you've got a visualization that was created in the library and added onto dashboard, the dashboard's been shared, you will still get access to that through those permissions. But if fundamentally you don't have access to see the data won't be shown. The only exception to that would be if it's a performance analytics indicator. Performance analytics permissions work slightly differently. So if you're taking a snapshot every night of the number of open incidents, that's stored as purely as a number. So you may have access to some of that, even if you don't necessarily have access to the data, but you certainly wouldn't be able to drill down to the data itself.
Great. We've got some last two questions. Maybe we can squeeze them in. Just a quick one. I use CMDB Query Builder to build reports. Can this be utilized in this module?
So CMDB Query Builder still exists in its own right today within the classic UI. We can still use the outputs of that. So CMDB Query Builder should be generating tables for you, and you should be able to go and use those tables as your source data for your visualization. So the answer ultimately is yes, you can use the data.
Okay. And finally, when you are looking to add new widgets, we see you are able to add data sources directly from indicators or tables directly, but are you also able to do it from report sources?
So can you repeat the last bit of that question again?
So when we're looking to add new widgets, we see that you're able to add data sources directly from the indicators or tables directly, but are you able to also do it from report sources?
So report sources don't exist within the new capability as it stands today. So you wouldn't be able to go from the old UI from a report source perspective and generate some of these new features here. Essentially, the only ways that you can generate a new visualization would be from the visualization screen or from the dashboards themselves. We might see some changes around the report sources piece, but I ultimately expect that report source functionality to become replaced with an equivalent at some point in itself in the new UI.
Yeah. Thank you. We've got one final question that's just come in. I'm so sorry. I'm just going to throw it out there. So is there any potential performance impact if we are using the old way and the new way at the same time? It would basically imply a certain degree of report duplication, sure, but how would the system performance be impacted? And is system slowness expected as more reports are created into the analytics platform?
So it shouldn't be any impact, no more impact of people creating more reports, right? And people that are using reports may be using the alternative version. So there definitely shouldn't be any negative impact of utilizing both pieces of functionality at the same time, because ultimately you're running data and queries in the same way as you would run a report as well. From a dashboard perspective, you've got lazy loading in a similar way that we've got lazy loading, something that's only been introduced as part of Utah to the dashboard capability. But again, from a performance point of view, ServiceNow really trying to focus on that performance piece and really trying to make it as fast as possible.
Great. Thank you so much, Mike. I think we've come to the end of our session. So thank you again for the awesome session, Mike. To our audiences, thank you so much for attending. Please keep an eye out for a follow-up email, which will contain a recording link of today's session, a survey, a free ebook, and the opportunity to book a free strategy session with us and with Mike directly as well. We'll also be announcing an opening registrations for episode 4, scheduled for next month of the webinar Wednesday. And once again, thank you so much for joining today's webinar. We hope you found it insightful, and we look forward to hosting you again. And thank you and goodbye. Sorry, I'll answer.
Thank you very much, everyone.